We're driven by a desire to revolutionize life on board. We want to harness change by sparking debate and challenging the norm.
To stay connected in the world that we are now, we need a sustainable alternative.
You're looking at floating apartment complexes.
It's fully autonomous, it's 3D printed, and it's electric.
We offer a platform for the open sharing of the knowledge that matters. This is Rethink's Night Out.
So this is where we live, coastal areas. More than 50% of the world's population is now living less than 100 kilometers from the coast. And what we're seeing in these areas because of climate change is increasing flood damage. About 50 to 60 billion US dollars a year in the past years, and this year it was even more already with Florida and Spain. Space was already mentioned as one of the other very big challenges. And where can we find the space? If you look at our planet from this perspective, we are no longer talking about planet Earth, but about planet water. This is where we can find a space for our growing world population, our resource scarcity, and also where we can live in a very sustainable and climate-adaptive way. When we proposed this idea, already in 2006, we came up with this idea, a floating city in the middle of the IJmuiden-Markermeer area between Amsterdam and Almere. Here you're looking at floating apartment complexes, floating nature, floating highways, and people said, you are completely crazy. This is not going to happen. Part of our plan was to make one module first, and that is what we proposed here in the Rijnhaven in Rotterdam. Floating pavilion there. And when we proposed this idea, a floating pavilion, just as the first unit towards building a floating city, people still said, well, this is not going to happen. This is a maritime area. Fortunately, there were enough people to support our idea so that we could actually start with construction. And here you see our polystyrene blocks with concrete beams and a concrete floor on top of it, which forms a very light, yet strong and stiff floating foundation. And this building was built and engineered and designed in less than 1 year. And that's how fast you can build on the water when you have the chance. It was built on one location, and with a tugboat it was brought to the final location in the Rijnhaven Rotterdam. And this is what it looks from the inside. Inflatable cushions, so we're not using glass, we're using the cushions to reduce the weight. The dome structure we built in only 1 weekend, so it was really pre-assembled, kind of a 3D puzzle that we were able to make very quickly. And then after 11 years, they had other plans for the Rijnhaven area, and we moved the floating pavilion to a new area, very close to the area where it was built, the RDM campus. And in 2022, the floating pavilion Rotterdam was mentioned as example project of climate adaptation by the IPCC. So that was a big breakthrough in policy making also for floating. In the meantime, we worked on floating housing projects, as you see here. So we're no longer talking about houseboats. This is steel skeletons with fiber reinforced composites, very light, very strong, almost no maintenance. Quite common in shipbuilding, but a revolution in the construction industry. And this is what it looks like. What's very interesting is that the families that live here, they designed their own house, they built it themselves with construction companies, and also they became owner of a plot of water, which is an innovation in itself, even in the Netherlands. So it's not only about housing. Housing is one of the things that you can do floating. But this is last month on the campus of the TU Delft, where we were able on the Green Village to make this tiny office. So our company made a floating structure, and then our French partners put a tiny office on top of it. And this floating structure, this floating platform, was built by 2 construction workers in less than 3 days. Tiny offices, houses, but also floating solar. A project we did together with the TU Delft. And you're looking at bifacial solar panels that also capture the sunlight that reflects on the surface of the water, increasing efficiency of solar with about 40%. And they can also rotate with the sun, increasing it with a further 20%. So those are just innovations. So what's our vision for the future? Moving from the floating house to really floating districts. And this kind of projects, floating islands of 75 by 75 meters, giving space for more than 100 people to live on, are already technically possible. And now, of course, you're looking to a nice picture on housing, but again, other functions, floating ports. Floating ports all over the world face space scarcity. They're highly impacted by climate change. And these are examples of floating container terminals that can actually be built and also allow for much larger ships to go to those kind of places. Nice pictures, but actually we did already very sophisticated research on this together with Marin, where we tested these islands as part of a European project called Space at Sea with 19 European partners subsidized by the European Commission, where we are able to do the testing and the connection forces, mooring forces, all of those things that are very important for the safety of these kind of projects. The data that came from these tests allowed us to build very sophisticated software packages, where we can now put in a 3D model of any kind of floating structure, whether it's a house or anything, and we can test any kind of wave and see how the structure responds. Will it be comfortable to live? Will it be safe? Are there optimizations possible? And these are the kind of outputs that it produces. One of the concerns that people sometimes have about floating is environmental impact. What does it do to the environment? But also on that aspect, we have done 10 years of research using underwater drones with highly sophisticated sensors. And what we've seen is that the water quality impacts are actually not negative, and the ecological impacts are actually positive. That's not the only thing about ecology. We're also very much involved in circular systems, capturing rainwater, producing local food, solar energy, using biodegradable waste for producing biogas. So really trying to make it as sustainable as possible. That we integrated in this project, a floating island in French Polynesia, touristic island that we did together with investors from the Silicon Valley from the US. Very interesting, great place to have a vacation. Zero environmental impact because it's in a highly sensitive area. And everything is just completely locally organized. It's not only for the rich. This is a project that we're doing right now for Zwolle in the Netherlands, the first social housing floating project in the world. 40 apartment complexes for all income groups, really for the social housing with the Social Housing Corporation. And this is going to be our major breakthrough, because the moment we can show that this technology is not only there for the rich, but for everyone, I think that's where our roadmap towards the floating city of the future will start. At this moment, we're still in protected areas near the coast. We already have the technology to go in front of the coast, and then the floating city, surrounded by floating breakwaters, but also with floating seaweed systems to take out the CO2 from the atmosphere, will create our blue revolution. Thank you very much.